Okay, so it's my great delight today to speak with Dr. Paul Mills. We are at the conference here in Yale on with the Society of Consciousness Studies, and there are lots of amazing people here. But we had a short break, so I thought I'd speak to Paul about some of the research we're doing on non-duality and well-being. It's kind of the theme on my book as well, meta-human. You know, the meta-human is somebody who's living non-duality all the time, has woken up from the dreamscape and the identifying with the fictional characters we are. So Paul's also the director of research at Chopra Foundation. Paul is a professor at the University of California, San Diego, and the Department of Public Health and Integrative Health and Well-being. And recently we've been doing some papers together, publishing them. Paul, can you explain exactly what we mean by non-duality?
Be happy to endeavor to do so, and particularly I can put it in the context of integrative health, which is where most of my work is and which is also part of the theme of this conference. And as many of you know, integrative health is the current name given to the efforts to incorporate what was called complementary and alternative medicine into the biomedical model.
Correct.
And that all grew out of what previously was called whole person medicine.
Correct.
And whole person medicine really, in its roots, back in the 1970s, at least in the US, grew out of inspiration from many of the traditional whole medical systems, such as Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine, Native American medicine, naturopathic medicine, and on and on. All these traditions historically had an understanding of the nature of consciousness, of the nature of the person before them, let's say the patient in this case, that not only are they the mind and body, but they are fundamentally awareness. That was understood and worked with in the healing modalities. But as all this movement through the whole person medicine to complementary to integrative here now in the West, unfortunately the wisdom of that was lost. And biomedicine, integrated medicine kind of took too much of the model of biomedicine on. And so that's where we are today.
Non-duality basically says that everything that you can give a name to, yes, or that has a form, yes, is actually one entity, seen differently.
Yes.
Okay, or experienced differently, right?
Right. Non-duality refers to the foundational awareness that really manifests all that is, including our individual selves. And what we perceive as an individual self is actually somewhat of an illusion. But this illusion is something that manifests during our developmental stages. As being a person, we develop an ego and an ego identity, which serves some purposes for some time. But eventually, it's really important that a person transcend that. Because as we've discussed before, transcending that is basically coming to know the reality of who and what you are. Not who as a person per se, but a what, foundationally.
The person itself is an experience that consciousness is having, right? Consciousness knows this entity as a person, but this entity is not a fixed entity, right? It's an intermittent stream of sensations being produced by consciousness and being also simultaneously experienced by consciousness. You can't say I have a body, because once you say I have a body, then which one would you identify with? We've been a zygote, an embryo, a baby, a toddler, so on and so. And so there is no fixed entity called a body. Now, I've been talking to physicists, etc., and one of the questions I ask them these days a lot, and there are many physicists here as well at this conference, is there such a thing, is there scientific proof for such a thing as inert matter? So this is, we say this is matter, this table is matter, glass and wood. But even at a fundamental level, this is not inert, right? This is a dynamic
Not according to
interaction.
my experience.
No, but even from scientific perspective, is there such a thing as inert matter? Because, you know, matter is dynamic, right? Even
Right.
as force fields and atoms and particles, it's dynamic. And I know, depending on the interpretation of quantum mechanics, but notwithstanding that all these interpretations exist, I think everyone agrees that before a measurement is made, what we call matter is just waves of possibility in mathematical space. So no one can prove the existence of a fixed entity called matter, inert matter, I think.
That is my understanding
And
too.
what we call matter is a particular human perceptual activity.
And if I may add, and the movement then from the individual perception where a person believes they are a separate entity in a body mind perceiving out into the world, as that is left behind and there's the movement into, say, the non-dual space, as we call it, or the oneness of consciousness, awareness space, then that kind of perception that you were describing really goes away, because everything is seen and known then as a manifestation of consciousness itself, which you know yourself to be, and you know everything and everyone else to be. So the description you were giving earlier about how matter is perceived now and how physics tries to understand it is really in many ways just symptomatic of our current materialistic world, where there's a belief that things exist independent of the self.
So this thing that we have, that we're using right now to speak to everyone, this is a symbolic representation of a deeper self, which is both individual and universal at the same time.
It's an interesting kind of paradox, but yes.
Yeah. And then when I look at these grapes or this piece of cheese or that cup, that's also a symbolic representation of how I see myself objectively. You know, that the objective, this grape, which is a human construct for this experience, which is color and texture and taste.
Hope it's organic.
Yeah, but this is a symbolic representation of me. I'm eating myself.
Yes.
That's a phrase in the Vedanta, no? Brahman consumes himself.
Yes.
Brahman consumes itself. Brahman recycles itself as form and phenomenon.
And in that state of, we could say, non-dual awareness and awakened state, what you just said is known and perceived continuously. There's never a break from the knowing that that actually is myself.
That's
as
right.
is that, as
As
is this, as
those
the
people
camera.
who are watching us
There's
and the camera.
absolutely nothing that is not yourself. It's an impossibility, even if you just ponder it on a mental level, let alone experiential level.
So Paul, we've been doing now some studies on people who go through a program at the center called Perfect Health. And we've been publishing some studies. Actively. So tell us some of your results, our results.
Sure, happy to. The results span different ranges, some of them more in traditional biomedical ranges, such as showing the effects of an immersion in an Ayurvedic program, how it changes the metabolites, which we study through something called metabolomics. We also are demonstrating how it changes functioning of the cardiac system by measuring what's called heart rate variability. We've also done some more traditional psychosocial measurements. How do things like spirituality change, and gratitude, and depression, and anxiety, and sense of connectedness in the world? But we've also published, it's relevant to this meeting, we published a paper on this sense of non-dual awareness.
And what did you find? What did we find?
Found a couple of things. There were two aspects to that part of the study, which I'm actually going to present today. So one is, before the course started, we gave every participant a blank piece of paper, and on the top it said, I am. And then there were 10 rows of lines where they were free to just fill out and write in what they thought they were. So many people often traditionally would say, well, I am a scientist, I am a mom, I am a dad, I am a... They put put their identity in relationship to an activity, a role they have socially. After the course, that changed significantly. People much less used these kind of terms that are grounded in society, but did things more like, I am part of nature. I am connected to everyone, these sorts of things. And during the course, as you might recall, these topics weren't covered. We didn't teach them about these ideas. They just manifested as part of being in this immersion of a traditional whole system, where they were meditating a lot, practicing yoga, having massage, having certain herbs for their constitution. So that was one part of it. And that part really leads to this other piece, which is this non-dual awareness. So we had a questionnaire that we were given actually by Dr. Jeffrey Martin, and we were grateful we got it because we had that in the study. And that questionnaire basically showed that as a result of this immersion in the Ayurvedic program, people's sense of, we're calling it a sense of because it was a beginning,
sense
a
of
movement,
being, sense of self.
A sense of self and sense of being. So the questionnaire documented this movement also away from kind of an overarching experience and belief in themselves as an individual separate from the environment and separate from others, but more a sense of connectedness, more of an identity of awareness itself, which gets back to this, what we said earlier, the whole systems traditionally knew that, taught that, and tried to help people cultivate that.
And the connection of that to healing, you know, the word healing, whole, wholeness, health, holy, they're all the same word, right? So the return to the memory of wholeness is healing. I would think that that would be perfect homeostasis, right? Perfect self-regulation, biologically even.
Agreed, for a multitude of reasons. I mean, I certainly, as many others do, feel that moving into that state of realization of yourself as all things is the ultimate healing. It's a kind of foundation of healing, right? And I think much of the stress and strain in current Western life, including the manifestation of depression and anxiety, is because people believe they're separate. That creates a stressor right out of the gate because it's not a natural phenomenon. It's not a real phenomenon either. The fact is, all this is one. And if a person has a belief they're separate, there's anxiety there.
Innumerable perceived objects based on the species of consciousness, number one. Innumerable minds, innumerable brains, innumerable looks to the world, but all happening simultaneously in one consciousness. You know,
it's amazing.
Yoga Vashishta, the Yoga Vashishta, the yogi says, infinite worlds come and go in the vast expanse of consciousness, like motes of dust dancing in a beam of light. And these days people are talking about infinite universes and multiverses, but they think they're real, and what the non-dualists realize that they're all frequency domains, different frequency domains, projecting as maybe of the same entity, pure consciousness, but being perceived differently as different dreamscapes, just like the one we're in right now, right? This is our collective dreamscape right now, and we need to wake up from that. So, you know, I was thinking, even as we were speaking, of two things that came to mind. That phrase that people use in the Bible a lot, you know, especially the Gospel of John. I am the way, the truth, and the light. It's pretty actually accurate. I am is the way, the truth, and the light, right?
That's a great point. It is the way. It's kind of a prescription and also describes the reality of the state.
Not referring to a person, but the awareness in which the sacred is being processed.
Exactly, and I would like to add that that's often a fundamental shortcoming of an interpretation of so many of the religious philosophies. People take it to heart as kind of in terms of their individual self and a personality, and they don't then, they're not able in that state to go beyond into the wisdom of the universality of the teaching and allow themselves to move into it. Because all these traditions point to the same fact, I am that, and that is all there is. So go to that. Allow yourselves to be that. Remember that. That's what we're trying to do with this
well,
research
we have to continue
programs.
with this research, and
We shall.
it's setting the stage for my book as well, Meta-Humans. I'm very grateful.
Happy to.
And we are now, you're actually the editor-in-chief of a new book coming out that will speak about the awakening to this reality.
Yes.
Thank you, friends, and stay in touch. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.